I never saw it coming, my wife, Sarah, cheating on me with her assistant. But surprisingly, what began as a gut-wrenching betrayal ended up propelling me into a promotion. The whole thing unfolded in a way that I could never have imagined. Sarah and I both worked for a major nonprofit in Western Canada, a huge organization that is frequently in the public eye. With close ties to politicians, our company's work was often the topic of conversation in the political arena. For nearly 8 years, the organization had been tirelessly working to get a certain agreement signed by the federal government, a deal that, despite the tireless efforts of the team, seemed to always be just out of reach. But that's not the focus of this story. The focus is Sarah's position in the organization. Her role had her constantly on the news, hobnobbing with the elites, traveling across the country, and doing her part to kiss up to important people, literally and figuratively. And through all of this, I had no idea what was brewing beneath the surface. It all came crashing down when I found out she was cheating with Trevor, her assistant, a guy she hired just 6 months ago. Trevor worked in a department upstairs while I was stuck in the registration department. Sarah and I had met at the organization 8 years ago, both starting out around the same time, grinding to get where we were. We worked hard to climb the ranks, her with her charm and charisma, me with my quieter, more introverted nature. For years, that dynamic worked. But then life threw a curveball at me. Health issues forced me to take a short-term disability leave, and that's when things started to unravel. Something felt off. As I was at home, unable to work, I started picking up on little signs. There were the strange looks I'd get from Trevor when I'd bring Sarah lunch or coffee. He'd always act like he didn't know who I was, even though I worked in the same building. It was almost as if he wasn't aware of our marriage. Sarah never talked about me with him, or at least, that's how it seemed. It wasn't as if we were out there flaunting our relationship at work, but people knew. Gossip flies in an office setting, especially one as small as ours. And that's how I learned the truth. A bit of background, Sarah is 45, and I'm 43. We have 2 kids, a 7-year-old son and a 5-year-old daughter. They're the light of my life, and I honestly feel like my life didn't start until they came into the world. When Sarah and I started dating, it was a big deal. Office policy forbade relationships between colleagues, but because we worked in such separate departments, no one really seemed to care. Of course, we were careful not to broadcast our relationship, but we were good at keeping things discreet. Still, we'd see each other at company meetings, and occasionally, our work would overlap. People, for the most part, accepted it and moved on. But then came Trevor. He was young, good-looking, and charismatic, everything I wasn't. And in an office with more women than men, he quickly became the object of attention. Sarah didn't seem to mind at first. She played it all off like it was just business, but I could see the way the female staff gravitated toward him. I wasn't blind to it. When Trevor started, Sarah didn't even mention that she had hired a male assistant. I wasn't bothered at first, but when I finally laid eyes on him, I could understand why she didn't mention it. He was, after all, attractive. And that was when she made a comment that stung, a comment that would stay with me forever. She said Trevor reminded her of me, but a younger version. Then, she went even further, saying Trevor was the version of me I could have been if I hadn't overthought everything and followed a different career path. That struck a nerve. I tried to let it go, but who wouldn't be offended by that? When I asked why she hadn't told me about hiring him, she laughed in my face. "Why does it matter?" she said. "You're just threatened by a little boy." She teased me, calling it jealousy. And, yeah, maybe she was right. Maybe I was a little jealous. But the way she completely downplayed the situation only made it worse. And then there were the whispers. The office gossip. I overheard our secretary chatting with Sarah about Trevor, and I couldn't ignore the giggles that followed. Red flags everywhere. But what made it worse was that I wasn't feeling well. I wasn't my usual self, and I knew it. I felt weak, mentally and physically drained. And I couldn't shake the feeling that Sarah was taking advantage of my vulnerability. When I went on short-term disability, I became the primary caregiver for our kids. Meanwhile, Sarah's hours at work stretched longer, and her trips out of town became more frequent. Each time she traveled, Trevor was by her side. She posted photos on Instagram, showing off her time away in clothes that were anything but professional, bikinis and beach shots, with the hint of him in the background. One photo stood out. It was of her on a beach, and I could tell she wasn't wearing a bikini top. It was just her, but I knew Trevor was there. I made a comment on the photo, trying to get a reaction. Scandalous, I wrote. But she didn't even acknowledge it. And then I started creeping. I checked out Trevor's public page, where he had posted his own beach photos, the same ones, taken from a different angle. The same water in the background. The same trip. I was right. And that's when I realized everything I had suspected was true. The moment I saw that photo, I couldn't breathe. There she was, my wife, laying on the beach next to him, a bikini top nowhere in sight. My heart raced. What was she thinking? Was this really happening? I couldn't just ignore it. I had to say something. I texted her immediately, my fingers trembling as I typed, "Should you be posting photos like that on Instagram?" Her reply was dismissive. "What are you talking about?" I couldn't hold back. "You're not wearing a shirt and you're showing a lot of skin. Do you think that's smart to be doing when you have a position like yours? People look up to you." Her response? A huge fight. She didn't even talk to me for the rest of her work trip. I put the word work in quotes because I knew. I knew she wasn't there just for business. She was with him. Sleeping with him. I could feel it in my bones. That trip, oh, it disgusts me now, was all over the country. Work, yes. But also pleasure, plenty of it. She'd take him along, and I was left behind, caring for our kids. Don't get me wrong, I loved doing it, but what I hated was knowing she wasn't just working. She was being unfaithful. I'd hear the whispers in the office. People were starting to talk. Late nights. Closed doors. But I refused to believe it. How could I? This was my wife. My partner. The woman I married. But the signs were everywhere. The photos she posted on Instagram, intimate dinners in dark, candlelit restaurants. It wasn't lost on me. These weren't business meetings. These were the kinds of meetings that shouldn't have been happening. And then there was the silence. The complete absence of concern from her. She didn't ask how I was feeling, not once, during my health struggles. I was barely holding it together, and she was gone, lost in her own world. She'd return home late, always with some excuse about how busy she was. The kids were confused. "Where's Mommy? When's Mommy coming home?" they'd ask. It broke my heart. How could I answer them? Should I lie? Or tell them the painful truth? Mommy's not just working. She's betraying Daddy. One night, things came to a head. I got a text from an unknown number. "Get to work now. You're going to want to see this. Don't call your wife. Don't let her know you're on your way. But head for your office." What was going on? Who was this? I tried calling back, but the line disconnected. I was lost in confusion, but I knew I had to go. I didn't want to wake the kids, so I called my mom to come stay with them. I drove to the office, parked a distance away so Sarah wouldn't spot my car. I slipped inside, using my key card to enter through the side door. The building was dark, too dark. But as I moved upstairs, I saw the lights still on in her section of the office. Way too late. I walked quietly toward her office. The door was slightly ajar, and what I saw made my stomach drop. Trevor. Her assistant. He was with her. On the desk. She saw me. I froze. My heart hammered in my chest. She had to hit him to get him to stop. She scrambled to pull her skirt back down, and he fumbled to zip up his pants. "Wow, Sarah," was all I could manage to say. Then came the lies. The same old story. "I can explain," she said, her voice shaking, desperate. But I couldn't hear her. I couldn't stand it. I turned to leave, but she grabbed my arm, pulling me back. She was angry. Not at herself. At me. "Who told you?" she demanded. "Why are you here? You didn't trust me, did you?" I laughed. "It wasn't a joke. You clearly haven't given me any reason to trust you. What did I just walk in on?" But Sarah wasn't done. She started blaming me for everything. She called me insecure, said I wasn't the man she married, that I was weak and dragging her down. I couldn't take it. I told her to shut up. "Don't come home," I said, then turned and left. The moment I stepped outside, the world seemed to shift. My phone buzzed. Texts from work, from people asking if it was true. Asking if I was okay. Word had already gotten around. I should have been focused on getting better. But how could I? My marriage was in pieces. I was supposed to return to work soon, but I couldn't face it. I asked to work from home to figure out what my next move would be. I had to protect my job, my family. I needed the income. And then it happened. The same random number texted me again, only this time it was worse. A video. A shaky, grainy video. But unmistakable. Sarah and Trevor. Again. On her desk. This time, there was no denying it. No more excuses. It was all unraveling. And now, I had no idea where to go from here. The first video was a jolt to my system. It wasn't the same night I had walked in on them, but there they were, Sarah and Trevor, their clothes different, the setting new, but unmistakable. The second video hit just as hard. It was them again, this time making out in her car in the parking lot. Each video hit me like a hammer, raw and unyielding. I didn't hesitate. I saved them all, knowing I had to make my next move count. How could I make this situation work to my advantage? The answer came to me like a sudden burst of clarity. There was an election coming up, one that could change everything. Sarah's boss, the person who held the reins, needed to be re-elected, or everything could crumble. I knew Sarah's job hung in the balance, but only if the person she worked for didn't make it back into office. I saw an opening. There was a real challenger, someone with a legitimate shot of winning, but they needed more endorsement. It wasn't just a matter of politics, it was personal now. This could be the wedge I needed to drive into Sarah's world. So, I reached out. I spilled everything, the lies, the videos, the betrayal, and sent them directly to the opposition. I had no doubt about it, this would bring everything crashing down around Sarah's boss. Once I hit send, it wasn't just political chaos that began to spread. Those videos didn't stay hidden for long. They ripped through the office like wildfire, exposing everything. The energy at work shifted overnight. It was like someone had flipped a switch, and suddenly, the building was suffused with tension. For 5 long months, I had to walk into that office like nothing was wrong. Pretend nothing had changed. Sarah and I were going through a separation, and I could barely look at her without everything boiling up inside me. The irony? Trevor was quietly let go, fading from the picture like a forgotten memory. In his place, Sarah hired an intern, a fresh face, barely old enough to drink. The rumor mill churned with whispers about that too. And the women at the office? They smelled blood. As soon as they heard I was single, they came at me from every direction. It felt strange, almost intoxicating, to be the center of attention after years of neglect. Flirting wasn't hard, not with all the offers, but I knew the score. I'd been down this road before, and I wasn't about to repeat my mistakes. Sarah had sucker punched me, and I wasn't going to let my guard down again. Sarah tried to come back a few times, apologizing, playing the I missed the kids card. But it wasn't real. The truth? She hadn't been around before, not truly. Not for me, not for them. The only thing that had changed was the looming threat of losing everything, and now, she wanted to salvage her position in the family. I wasn't having it. I couldn't. Legally, I had to give her visitation rights. But she wasn't welcome in my home, not without consequences. I let my mother stay in the house, just in case Sarah tried anything shady. She wasn't going to lock me out or twist the kids against me. Then came the moment of truth. The election results. Sarah's boss didn't make it back in. The sweet, sweet feeling of victory was palpable. Within a week, the opposition moved in, making their own changes. Sarah? She was gone, replaced. And me? I was handed a promotion, a $155,000 raise, just like that. But the divorce was still on the horizon. This wasn't the end, not yet. I still had to navigate the final stretch of this bitter road. But for now, I wanted to share my story. A word of advice, think twice before you get involved with someone at work. You never know who might be lurking, ready to catch the real you in a moment of weakness. As for the anonymous messenger, the one who sent those videos, I had to ask Angela if it was her. She denied it, of course, but I couldn't help but wonder. Maybe she saw an opportunity, maybe she knew how things were unfolding, and she took it. I like to think it was Angela. Maybe she just won't admit it. Either way, the result was clear. Sarah's extracurricular activities came back to bite her hard. Talk about drama, right? I mean, Trevor couldn't find a more discreet spot than the boss's desk. Really? A broom closet would have worked better. But then again, I suppose that would have meant any strange sounds could be blamed on cleaning supplies. And as for me? Well, who knew that my personal disaster would have such an impact on a political campaign? Revenge, it turns out, really is best served with a side of career advancement. So, here we are. Another day, another mess of office politics. But the real question is, who sent those videos? Was it Angela, or one of the women who saw a chance to win me over? What do you think? Was Angela the secret texter? Let me know in the comments. And if you enjoyed the story, be sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell. You won't want to miss the next twist. See you then.